Down to Biscayne.
Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. This is not Ethan Skolnick. This is not Leif Sylvander. This is Alex Toledo, and I've got my guy Brady Hawk with me here after a 114-106 Heat win in Charlotte. And this is one of those where you just can't take for granted if you're a Heat fan. This is one of those where you know going in that although it's one of the worst teams in the league, these are the types of games where, you know, the Heat sometimes let you down. And honestly, I thought this game went pretty well compared to some of those types of games we've seen in the past, maybe because they just got, punched in the face in the last game, so they couldn't afford a game like that. But I think this is the exact type of game they needed. An opponent like this to kind of get them in their rhythm a little bit. Just somebody that's not too tough, because that Magic defense the other night had them just absolutely in hell. And look, guys, good news. Everything is fixed. 79th percentile offensive rating, 73rd percentile half-court offensive rating, 95th percentile transition offensive rating. They're leading offense, folks. But no, in all reality, I thought playing this Hornets defense is what they needed. They got through it, and I think there was a little bit of a scare at the end, right? You had that run by the Hornets in the last couple of minutes, and I was starting to wonder, is this going to be just one of those pods that's really hard to get through because everybody is upset and we're all disjointed because it's one of those games where you just expect them to win, and it wasn't the case. So welcome, right? We're back. Everything is good again. And I think what you look at tonight, that was really the biggest difference, in my opinion, from the Magic game was the defensive consistency and the consistency with their activity. You look at the points off turnovers, the Heat finished with 24, Hornets 11. I think, like I'm always going to mention, like I have for the past few years, that's almost always one of the most important stats for the Heat. And they got back to that tonight. They got back to just hounding the other team on defense, and I think it just made it so much easier for them in the fast break. And like I mentioned, they did their part finishing in fast break. The other thing that was a huge difference when you just look at the stats is they didn't get out rebounded by 15 this time. I think they got out rebounded by 2 or 3, much better, right? I think there's still some things they can fix as far as their defensive rebounding, because that's usually one of the Heat's strengths, is not letting the other team get a whole bunch of offensive rebounds. Wasn't quite as bad as the other night. I still think they can get better, but this was much more of what you expected as far as on that end. And then offensively, 33 assists. That is fantastic. Maybe a few more turnovers than you'd like, but when you look at the assist turnover ratio, I think, these are all like the different battlegrounds that you want the Heat to be winning in, right? I think the ball was moving around. I think a lot of guys, got shots up. The only guy from the starting lineup who I feel didn't get into a great offensive rhythm was Bam. And maybe we could talk about that later. But, he finished 6 of 17. Just about everybody else, I thought, had a pretty good game. Of course, to varying levels, and we'll get into some of these guys. But I think tonight was a much more encouraging game. Of course, I think we all kind of expected a bounce-back offensive game where it just didn't look as tough based on the opponent. But I think process-wise, getting to see certain guys just put their will and put their imprint on the game was very reassuring. And, there was nothing perfect about it, right? Like you look at Tyler and Terry, they both finished with, I think, good games, right? But I think you can point out certain things like, the 8 combined assists is nice, but then you look at 5 combined turnovers between Tyler and Terry. Those are certain things you can pick at. But then you look at the scoring, they both had pretty good scoring games. I think, like, offensively, they got back to the process they wanted to, where guys are getting their shots up. They're playing with pace. The ball is moving, right? They're going to have to find a balance, and I think that's one of those things that's going to be really tough, right, is can you get all those guys a good amount of shots every game? I think that's going to be one of those things that just varies game by game. There's going to be a couple of guys who don't get quite as many. And so far, like that wasn't really the case tonight for Bam, but he did take 17 shots and, hit 6 of them. So there's still some things to iron out, but I think tonight was about getting back to the identity and just executing throughout a game, because that third quarter the other night against the Magic was awful. So Brady, to get to you now, we're going to have to do these segments, folks. These segments, I'm proud of myself here, not to toot my own horn, just because I'm a self-taught producer and I put together these segments here as far as the music and Ethan's voiceover. And I'm very happy that we have Insurance by Lynette back with us. Shout out A Aggressive Insurance. Once again, a yearly sponsor. She's always on there on Playback with us, which of course you can check us out, playback.tv/5RSN. That's where we're going to be watching the games with the fans, interacting with you guys. It's always a good time. Of course, I got to mention here really quickly, check out our Discord server Off the Floor. The link is going to be in the description as always. Shout out A Aggressive Insurance. Let's get to the A Aggressive Insurance player of the night, excuse me.
And now it's time for the A Aggressive Insurance Player of the Night, sponsored by our friend Lynette. You can find her at insurancebylynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's, insurancebylynette.com. If you need car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, or any other type of insurance, she's the person to go to. Based in Lauderhill, she services the entire Tri-County area here in South Florida, and she will make sure to get you the best deal. She'll probably talk to you about the heat while you're at it. Reach out to her, insurancebylynette.com. And now, the player of the game.
Brady, tonight was a big night for Jimmy Butler. I think just an awful night the other night. It was one of those things where him and Bam both struggled. I think the thing with Bam is he got to the free throw line a lot in the first game, and that was kind of, something that made you feel a little bit better about it. Whereas Jimmy, you just didn't feel him much in that first game versus Orlando. And that's something we're going to have to be, of course, watching for going forward with, some of these better defenses when Jimmy has to go up against multiple guys with great size who can really move their feet. And you're facing positional size at every position, right? That's going to be something to monitor. But tonight, he really got going, especially in the second quarter and especially in the fourth quarter. I don't know what it was, but that was the way that he decided to go about it. That second and fourth quarter, he picked the spots and he just kept going to him over and over and over. And you saw him making plays, whether it was the scoring, whether it was the passing, whether it was the defense. I thought his defense was much better tonight. I just think you saw a little bit of everything of what Jimmy gives you. Also had a strong rebounding game. What did you think about his play tonight, and what is sustainable? What changed from that first game?
So I'll start with what changed. I mean, we kind of talked about, I mentioned the rotation in that first game. I thought Spo was going to have to play around with the substitution pattern a little bit. With what he did, I felt like Jimmy and Bam and Tyler were kind of spending too much time on the bench together at the same time in that first game. And he was running Terry with the second unit. And obviously in this game, they switched up a little bit and they got back to what they did a lot last year, which was Jimmy with the second unit. And I think what's clear there is that it's probably not the cleanest fit in the world, like when on paper, that you're going to put Jimmy with those guys off the bench. But what's clear is that like they're in a position where they have to push Jimmy and Bam, but specifically here with Jimmy, to like be the primary option, to be the go-to guy. And the only way they're going to do that is if they do that type of lineup splits where he can go off at the beginning of the second quarter where he runs off like 7 points in a row, because he's the guy out there that has to have the ball in his hands. They were running in that lineup, but it almost felt like Jaime was like their almost point guard. And I know there's no quote-unquote point guards out there, but he was kind of the guy that was like setting things up, getting it past half court a lot of the time. So I'm interested in seeing more of that. But I think that the key for him being player of the game here was just, you wanted to see it from him. You wanted to see that he still had it in him, and he can 100% still score in bunches. Like at any given moment, he could be kind of a rocket. And there's no chance that, first of all, 26, 8, and 8, like he was on triple-double watch. Like all in all, he was just impacting. But 17 free throw attempts. Now, with Jimmy and Bam, we're going to have to start talking about free throw makes. It probably feels like a little bit more often because it feels like they're missing a lot. But the attempts are the key here. The fact that he can still once again, let's preface this with saying this is the Charlotte Hornets, and I want to make sure we note that because this is a matchup that favors guys like Jimmy. Jimmy always plays well against his team. He can mismatch on, he can get to the paint, he can do all that stuff. But the fact that he can still do it, and like you said, like they have to win these type of games, it is still important. But I thought there was moments of the game when Jimmy had the ball in his hands that the new offense, quote unquote, looked like the preseason version. Like there was a stretch there where I said it looked closest to the preseason when he got to the paint a few times. He threw like an overhead pass to the corner with a hammer screen there. I think one was Burks in the corner. And then another one happened. And I'm like, this is kind of the offense. You have to generate paint touches, and you just have to work driving kicks. They only got up 34 threes in this game. I know they keep trying to shoot for 40. But this is kind of my overall takeaway, I'll say. I think they have to kind of get out of their heads a little bit this season about the new offense thing, about like shifting their games and not shooting mid ranges and doing the layups threes. Like, yes, that has to be hammered from the coaching staff, like to put that in their heads that like they have to get like to these spots. But I think that was put in a position, like the reason they came up with that is to get the guards, specifically Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier, better shots. And we're going to get to Tyler, but I think you're seeing what that's doing for him. Like he's getting way better looks. He's more efficient. And he just looks way better out there in shorter spans. That's what that thing was for. It was to eliminate mid-range shots for him. Now I don't feel like it was like an overall roster thing, because I'm watching guys like Bam that's almost in his head a little bit where he's hesitating and he doesn't know like when to go, when to not, if he could shoot this one. Like, I think they have to put it kind of a thing in where it's like, Bam, play your game. Like, go be free. Just go hoop. Do what you did last year. Do what you did in the Olympics. Just go get shots up and be comfortable. Because it was weird to see him look just somewhat uncomfortable a lot of the game offensively. So I think that has to be the key here. That it's like this shift doesn't have to go for everybody. This shift is just to maximize certain guys. And I think you saw that with Jimmy in the first game. And then I think he quickly realized what this means for him. Like, I think he quickly realized, okay, I could still play my game in this version of this offense. It's just that I have to initiate a little bit more, and that's what they want from me. So next up, I'm glad they got to that. That's why I think Jimmy's player of the game, 26, 8, and 8. He figured out his place in the offense. Now we have to start watching Bam a little bit closer, because he has to. I'm glad he got the shot attempts up, but I think it took it until the second half, and even the shots he was getting up felt like he was hesitating on them a lot of the time. Like, I want a confident getting to my spots and rising right up Bam Adebayo. I think that's kind of the key. And I think that'll come, but I just think it's early. They're trying to figure out the offense, but Jimmy's the player of the game tonight. He kind of led them late in that game as well to kind of put them over the top.
100% agree. This whole quote unquote new offense, which, by the way, if you get a chance to take a look at what Spo said after practice yesterday, was interesting. He was kind of shooting down that whole idea and it's, stuff that he said this season already, as far as like reinvent the wheel, right, on offense. And that's stuff that he's said previously, but it's like, I've seen a little bit of that, Spo playing defense against certain narrative thing when it comes to the quote unquote new offense, right? So it's just a quick note, because I think it's interesting to hear him say that, and I feel him. I feel what he's saying, because like you look at certain things, right? Like one of the biggest storylines was Bam taking threes, right? Took 2 tonight. Don't remember how many he took the other night. Wasn't that many. And it's just nowhere near the same rate that he was taking in the preseason. So that's one thing, right? He's not exactly the volume stretch big that I guess certain fans maybe started expecting because of the rate he was taking him at. And by the way, was making him in preseason as well. His shot looks pretty, all that. So I'm not disagreeing that he should take the three. I'm not doing any of that. But that part hasn't exactly been there, right? Just to start off. And then you talk about how hard it is to incorporate so many different shot creators into one lineup. And again, not to turn it all back into the starting lineup talk, because it's absolutely not just about that, right? They get to a lot of other lineups, but that starting lineup, like I mentioned earlier in the show, the field goal attempts are going to vary night by night. And I think Bam, like you mentioned, is probably the first guy to watch when it comes to that, right? I think, like he mentioned after the Magic game, he's always, trying to do the right thing, quote unquote. And we've seen this from Bam for years. This is the stuff that fans were complaining about before he really started taking more shots, self-created shots over the past couple of regular seasons. And I think it's like he goes back to certain instincts, which is just kind of, I'm going to screen, I'm going to facilitate for my guys. Of course, he's going to rebound. He's going to, get to the paint. He's going to take the occasional midi. It's not nearly the same volume he was taking them last season, where it was a bunch of self-created middies. We're not really seeing that part of his game. So you're seeing shots like that part of his game was a huge chunk of his game offensively, right? And how he got to those points, that got taken away. That, like I mentioned, the threes haven't been there. So that's already like a lot that you're not getting from Bam. And I'm not blaming him for it, because I think he's just kind of playing the game and reading and reacting and doing what's necessary. So I don't put a lot of blame on him for trying to play the right way. And I think today, like you mentioned, he tried to, I think, assert himself a little more, and he got the 17 field goal attempts. So his field goal attempts were not low today. That wasn't the issue. I just think everybody getting into their rhythm, everybody finding their shots, it's going to be a much harder thing, right, to actually put into place and do every single night, whether you're going against an elite defense or a bad defense like the Charlotte Hornets. I think getting everybody to make sure that everybody's eating, right? You can't just press a button and do it, right? I think it's hard to get all these guys involved and make sure that everybody is getting the amount of shot attempts. So that's something that it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, to work out throughout the season. It's going to be something we're constantly monitoring. But, Jimmy, I think starting himself was just huge. I think it's very reassuring for fans to be able to see that he can still do this. Like you mentioned, the mismatch hunting, the fact that he can get to the free throw line at will, 17 free throw attempts is insane, right? Even if it is against the Hornets, it's a reassuring thing to do, to see that he can still do all of the stuff, right? And of course, doesn't mean that you think, he's going to be right back to playoff Jimmy from 2 years ago, but he can still do this stuff. And I think it's going to be about finding the balance between him and the rest of the guys. And that's going to be a running theme. That's going to be a running theme. I think when you look at what else went right today, that second quarter, fantastic. They put up 33 points in that second quarter. A lot of it was the forced turnovers, like we mentioned before, the fast break stuff. That's going to be something that they have to keep. Like they were super active today with their hands, more of what we saw in preseason, right? And I think in the same way that keeping up the offense that you want to, where everybody's getting touches and everybody's getting shots, I think it's going to be tough to keep up that level of defensive activity. It's just so much to ask. Although I really like the game plan, right? Like I think when they're doing that, they're hitting a different level because there's so much less pressure on their half court offense and defense. But man, it's one of those things where if you're a Heat fan, you hope that they can do this night after night, because that's the type of stuff that's going to win them games. And that's the type of stuff that, if they get to the playoffs, ideally not having to go through the play-in, you're going to expect every night. It needs to be a part of your game plan and your I just think your strategy every night. So we're seeing, I think, the vision for what this team should be early on. A couple other things interesting, that Spo went to a 10-man rotation tonight that did not include Haywood Highsmith. We saw Drew Smith in there. We saw Alec Burks in there, who had a really nice game and ended up closing alongside Terry and Tyler. That was definitely not one of the closing lineups that we were expecting to see. I don't know if you disagree there, Brady, but Alec Burks, just doing kind of what we expected of him. The guy can really shoot the ball, and people had concerns about if he was going to do too much on ball. I haven't really seen much of that at all. Like, I think he's playing kind of right into what they do. It doesn't seem like he's trying to force the issue. And the guy is frankly a knockdown shooter. Like, it's a positive thing for them. And by the way, they shot 41% from three tonight. And I think that was kind of one of the reasons why their offensive rating looked so good, because they were okay at the rim and I think below average from mid range. So like when the Heat make their three and the other team doesn't, like I think the Hornets shot like 32% or something. That's always a recipe for success with the Heat. Other than that, let's get to the next segment. I know I've been talking a whole lot. Brady, I'm going to try to get you more involved here, because I'm not doing a good job of balancing this. So imagine how tough it must be to balance it with 5 shot creators. So let's get to the next segment, the real estate shop defending the house segment.
And now it's time for our Defending the House segment, sponsored by our friends over at The Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, or at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. They help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The Real Estate Shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because Amanda and Javier have a deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. Again, it's at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. And now, who defended the house?
All right, Brady. Who defended the house tonight?
I'd say it's Bam Adebayo. Early in the game, there was a play where LaMelo gave him a shot fake, and he kind of fell for it, and LaMelo got by him, and he just basically blocked it out of bounds, and him and LaMelo were kind of going back and forth about it. But I feel like I've seen that play every single year against the same type of players. He just finds a way to box in these type of shot creators like LaMelo one-on-one and recover and make those type of plays.
His recovery is insane.
But I mean, to go back to the first quarter and say this type of defensive play kind of shows of how much this game was an offensive game. That's just the way these Charlotte Hornets games are. Spo even knows this is what's crazy because we know how much of a madman he is defensively, and the fact that he recognized of what this type of game would be, he didn't play Haywood Highsmith in a 10-man rotation in this game, and I think that kind of shows the direction they felt they had to go. Where they felt like they had to lean in an offensive shooting type direction. And
yet they played Drew Smith and Thomas Bryant.
Exactly. I mean, Thomas Bryant, they're forced to because Kevin Love and Kilo Ware are out. Drew Smith definitely did surprise me because I felt like they did kind of lock down that backup point guard minutes with, in that Jimmy lineup. I felt like the Alec Burks thing was let's try it out and see if he can space the floor. But also Duncan has had some shooting issues early in the season here. He hasn't had that game where he shot well. He's kind of struggled from deep where they kind of needed that pop off the catch, and Burks was that. So I kind of expect him to stick. I thought he's not going to be an all-world defender on the other end, but I think he's a good enough serviceable player on the offensive end that he could really space the floor, does not demand things on the ball. I thought he actually had a really good game. I was surprised with kind of what we saw. But I agree with a lot of things you were saying before about the defense and the deflections and everything, because it's so crazy and a change of pace from what we used to talk about with this team, because we used to just talk about how horrible they were in transition and the fact that they didn't know what to do in that area. And now I'm if they don't get in transition, I don't think they win games. They've really grown in that area, but they have to play off turnovers. They have to play a little bit faster. It feels like Jimmy's always been a guy that likes to hit ahead pass to him. He can jump up and get it and score, but he's never been okay, I'm going to get the board and go push pace. Yeah. He's even done that. He's even been pushing pace. There was a play specifically where he dribbled down the court quick when he got it and swung it over to Jaime, and Jaime hit a in transition three on that right wing. And it was they're really making it, something they really want to do. And I think they have to. I can't see a style where they have to play in the half court, because we're seeing what kind of happens at certain points of the game when they play into the half court constantly. It could become a little problematic. So I'd say that was the play from Bam. Rotation-wise, I did think it was a little interesting, the direction they went in. It's hard to say how I think they're going to keep. I think they're going to change it every game. I really do. I don't think there's going to be something where it's a for sure rotation moving forward.
Kind of weird, it's going to be right?
It is we're not used to this, and we're not used to him going 9 or 10. It's usually he's pretty similar with the amount of players he's going to play. But I think they realized that if they are going to hammer down on this availability thing, they're going to have to use as many bodies as possible, kind of lower in the rotation and mix it up a little bit. That it's okay, if Haywood, it's not your night, you're definitely going to play in the next game, and we're going to need the other guy to take a night off. Yeah. I kind of like that mentality, but I think we can agree here that this roster is the one thing I'll say about this offensive thing is it's so much more built to their best players. How many times in past years was it random role players on this team that would be in their top 3 in scoring. Like every single night, there was somebody, where there was Gabe or Max or Caleb or a lot of these guys, and that was fine. Like that was what they were built off of. But I think they realized with this roster, they have to maximize their best players to ultimately get where they want to get. So you're seeing this. I'm looking at this stat sheet tonight, and I'm looking at the bench where there's this not a lot of like popping scorers on the bench, but the starters: Jimmy 26, Tyler 22, Terry 19, Bam struggled with 12. Jovic I thought had a really good game just all around. I thought he was a good connector, but he had double figures. All 5 starters had double figures. That's kind of the direction of this to me, is like, okay, we don't really care about if it's one guy's night or the other, but it has to be somebody's night of our main players if we want to win in the regular season. So I'm curious to see how much that lasts. Like if this is like, once again, are we being tricked because it's the Charlotte Hornets defense and they're able to get what they want to get when it's like a bigger team like Orlando? Are they going to be able to do that? I don't know. But I liked what we saw from a lot of that. And we've probably gone too far in this episode without talking about the guard play, because I really think their offense is going to get where Terry and Tyler gets them in terms of efficiency, because having a game where 7 of 15 and 7 of 12, each of them, it's like, that's all you can ask for. Like that, like being, and they didn't have the ball in their hands as much as you would think too. Like they were quick and efficient with the ball in their hands. I really applaud Tyler for adapting to this style so quickly, because I feel like he's taken the biggest hit, and not in a negative way. It's just like, instead of having so many pick and rolls, he's asked to like get to the rim and shoot threes. And I kind of said early in the game, before Jimmy got to the 17 free throw attempts and he started attacking, I'm like, is it crazy to say like Tyler's been by far their best rim attacker so far this early in the season? Like he's getting to the rim quite a lot and he's finishing a lot. And I'm like, there's something here that it's like, it's making it a little bit easier for him, where he doesn't have to guard, 2 on the ball going off a screen. It's more of, okay, I'm going to play off the catch here and try to drive and find an opening. I think this is really good for him. And it's leading to much, smoother offense, and he can play off those threes more consistently. So really good game from him. I think he deserves a ton of credit for games like this. And Terry, if you're telling me you're getting 7 of 12, Terry Rozier, you'll take that any night. Like, I don't care how many points he's scoring. If you're seeing that type of box score, he's having a really good game. So if he could kind of like turn that type of efficiency around, like, this changes a lot for this offense. So credit to the backcourt in this one.
100%. I thought they were huge for getting them through the game, because like I mentioned, Jimmy was great in those second and fourth quarters, but those first and third, they were a huge part of being able to get through. A little shout out to Nico here for the 6 assists quietly, with 1 turnover. Shout out to Jimmy for the 8 assists and 1 turnover. Like I mentioned before, I think the passing has been pretty smooth, specifically in this game. Like, you just go down the list, right? Not too deep. Go too deep into the box score stuff, but Jimmy 8 assists, Jovic 6 assists, Bam 3, Tyler 5, Terry 3, Jaquez 4, Thomas Bryant 2, right? Everybody that played had an assist pretty much, other than Alec Burks, who did his fair share of just shooting the ball when he got it and made them, right? And making them when he got it. But the ball was moving, and I think everybody, it's one of those games where, like I mentioned before, you see the vision a little bit. Like, Tyler's getting a little bit of his shots, but it doesn't feel forced. Terry's getting some stuff on ball, a lot of stuff off ball, just off the catch, right? And it's not all catch and shoot. I think them, like both of them, even having different games, there is similar stuff when it comes to like just finding that balance between on and off ball scoring, because both of them provide value in both of those places, right? And I think tonight they were closer to that balance. And speaking of them, since we already got to it, might as well get to the next segment here. Mobile C-arm staffing, X-ray on the play of the day.
And now it's time for the X-ray of the play of the day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. If you work in a hospital or a medical office, get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-ray of the play of the day.
Brady, we kind of hinted at it already a little bit, but what was the play of the night for you?
So yeah, there was a couple down the stretch. I mean, before I give the play, I'm going to say one thing. I think if you could say one positive thing about the way this roster is looking at the moment, it's that they really do have a bunch of options down the stretch of games in these situations. Because I'm looking at, there was a shot by Jimmy late where he kind of hit a pull up three late in the clock. So obviously, many people don't want him shooting threes late in the games because of the kind of his past record. Uh, but he's still always going to be an option late in games. You have Tyler, who I'm going to get to in a second, who hit a big one. And then Terry's kind of their shot creator late in games, and Bam's going to have opportunities. And it's like the fact that they do have these options and they could place a spacer out there in Burks or a defender out there in Haywood or a connector out there in Jovic. It feels like there is an offensive formula, at least for that to be fixed in theory. So that's positive. So before I get, I'll just say that the play was for me was Tyler. The fact that they can utilize their backcourt together in the clutch, I think, is important. And the play was pretty much Tyler. Terry just came flying off that wing instead of ghost screen and just flew off his defender, just slipped it totally. And Tyler got to get to his right, which is a strong way of flowing into threes, got to step back, kind of a little pullback, and hit the three. And it's like, when you could kind of run that type of stuff, when there's teams that are loading up in the paint on Bam and Jimmy at that point in a play like that, and you could put Terry out there flying off a screen and Tyler could flow into that, that's pretty key. Because I'll say it's funny because I remember they used to do a lot of this with Max when they used to run the Tyler Max lineups in the past. A little bit with Gabe, but it was like they wouldn't get as much of a reaction with Gabe as they would with Max, but they couldn't really run Tyler and Strus lineups for long, as we know. Like we didn't see many of those. So the fact that they can get similar reaction late in games when Terry's setting it, I think is important. So I'm interested to see more of that. I like the ghost screen. It's funny because even last year when they first got Terry, in the few games that we did see with the two, that was like the one thing that stuck out to me was like, okay, they love this little ghost screen thing because one of them could create off something. Like one of them's going to get an opportunity. So that for me was the play of the night. I don't know if you had a different one down the stretch that you stuck out a little bit more to you. But I am interested a little bit just to see more often what they get to down the stretch of games, because I made a joke like kind of on Twitter earlier, was like, okay, I feel a lot better about them this year, late, like last 2 minutes of the game. It's just about them figuring out the first 46 minutes offensively now, like them just consistently getting to certain things. But we'll see how that plays out for the next 80 games. But I thought that was a good start, at least to be pretty efficient down the stretch.
For sure. It was one of those where I think it's going to be the first clutch game of many, maybe not quite as many as a couple of seasons ago. But I do think this team, it gives me that vibe of like, they're going to be good enough on defense to get them to clutch games. Even though I am still a little bit like, I think the jury is still out on their defense and how consistent they're going to be. Because I think they can be elite on a night-to-night basis, but I'm not exactly expecting it yet, just because I think they've, it's like the things that they have to kind of go through with that starting lineup. I think it's just hard to ignore, right? Like for as much as effort as Terry and Tyler have given, and I think like both of them have been okay for what you expect from them, right? Like nothing out of this world, but especially I think Tyler has been pleasantly surprising because he had already shown some growth there, but it hasn't stuck out like a sore thumb in ways that it used to, right? And obviously it's really early on, but I think it's just one of those things where the defense, it's going to be good enough to get you to clutch games. And I think you've got so many offensive just shot creators. It's going to be interesting to see, the same thing. How do they get to that balance in that situation, right? Like what becomes the hierarchy? And I think that was part of what went right tonight is not to oversimplify things, but when Jimmy is playing like Jimmy, everything else just makes more sense. Like guys, I think in my opinion, flow into kind of their proper roles. Like we mentioned with Tyler and Terry, I think they look great also, like you mentioned, because there wasn't that much pressure on them to have to create their shot over and over. I think you got a little bit of a healthier balance because Jimmy was giving you what he was giving you and because the ball was moving. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep this up versus better defenses and more serious teams, just to be honest, because the Hornets are not a serious team. But it was good to see them do it nonetheless, right? And I think other than that, I need Bam. I think we need Bam to figure out how does he get going to the rim more, because the 5 out is great in the sense of like just conceptually you have space for everybody else to get to the rim. And like you mentioned, it's done wonders already for Tyler It's obviously helped Terry as well, just to have more space getting to the rim. But, how do you get Bam to benefit from the 5-out, right? I think that's what you need. You got to figure out. Like, they like to occasionally run those inverted screens, those quick actions. I think sometimes they just end up kind of like not going anywhere, because the other team will just do a quick hedge and recover. And like we mentioned before, Bam is mostly trying to get other guys involved so far. Like, that's what we've seen in these first couple of regular season games. It doesn't feel like he's really been looking for his shot a lot. So I think they got to find a way to get him involved, right? And I think something else like that you mentioned earlier, Duncan. And we've done this before, right? Like, we've done this topic before, in the sense of like, Duncan, when he's like a 7th or 8th man, is not quite as impactful. And unfortunately, I feel like it's proven again, just in these couple of games here, because he's being kind of relegated to being a spot up shooter. And Duncan is an awesome shooter, elite shooter. I think we all know that he gets in his rhythm by, coming off screens and coming off handoffs and moving around, constantly moving and relocating. I think that's what he likes to do. And yeah, you want him to take spot up threes. Of course, he's a flamethrower, but I think you really need to find a way to get him going as well. And to me, it's no coincidence that it's the two of them that are struggling, because you're not really seeing too many of those Duncan Bam 2-man game actions. Haven't played much together. If I remember correctly, like, I don't think they've spent a lot of time on the floor together in these first couple of games. I think that's a lever of offense that they need to get to more. It's always been something that's been extremely effective for them. I think you got to still do some figuring out of the rotations to get some of these pairs together, like you were talking about the other day on the podcast. I think that's the most obvious one, right? We talk about Jimmy and K Love and kind of line them based off of that pairing. And then we talk about Duncan and Bam. I think they got to get to it. I think Duncan looks amazing when he's playing his 2-man game with Bam. They just do it so nicely together. It's very natural, and it gets the offense going. I think they got to figure that out as well. And that's one of those things where you're getting diminishing returns because you're trying to get all of these guys involved. It's like somebody's not going to get as many. Somebody's not going to get in a rhythm. And that's why I'm a little bit frankly concerned about it. I think I gotta see how they balance it out game by game, because I think you're going to get diminishing returns just naturally from one or two of these guys that we talk about. And so far, Duncan has been that guy. I think Bam, to a different extent, has kind of had those same concerns. So I think if you get that Duncan Bam 2-man pairing game going, I think that might be a way to get both of them going. I think that might be a way to get your offense going a little bit in certain lineups, like when Jimmy's out. Just go back to what works, man. And I think that's one of those where, like, throughout the Jimmy era, it's been in my opinion, their best offensive action. So it'll be nice to see some of that. I think Heat fans probably miss Kevin Love a little bit after these first couple of regular season games, just sort of the stability that he brought you. Thomas Bryant actually, I thought, was decent tonight. Just coming in and just doing his job, right? But Love is one of those where it's like you miss the shooting, you miss the rebounding, you miss the occasional outlet passes that just give you a couple of extra easy opportunities for easy buckets in transition. I think you missed that. And really, I'm interested to see where it goes from here. And that's what we got for tonight. Me and Brady said before the show that we're going to do 15, 20 minutes. And I should have known we weren't going to stick to that because I ramble a lot, and I did it again tonight. So sorry about that. I'm going to try to get you more involved next time, Brady. Thank you for putting up with my stuff. Thank you to the fans, the audience, for putting up with my stuff. Had a massive headache going into this, so I've been feeling a little bit off my game. Thank you for putting up with it. Again, make sure to check out our Discord server. It's going to be the link is going to be in the description to this show and every other show that we put out. Make sure to check us out on playback. And shout out to A Aggressive Insurance. Shout out to C-Arm and Staffing. And shout out to realestateshop.com. Thank you guys. Have a good night.